Home is more than our things or just a place. It protects those we love. It holds memories. Home is often our heart, but something is happening to our home. That's how our story began, Earth Day 2021. And what's happening to our home is forcing more and more of us from our homes. The United Nations found that in 2020, 1.7 million Americans moved because of extreme weather, weather often made worse by climate change. And last year was no better. 20 major disasters hit the U.S., causing at least $145 billion in damage in 2021. That's the third most destructive year in American history. And as more Americans move because of the effects of climate change, it's something we can now call climate migration.
So climate migration is really on a continuum. On one end of the continuum, it's people who are being forced to move. They're being displaced. They're losing their homes and their livelihoods. And they're having to live somewhere else that's essentially a safer place to live and rebuild. On the other end of the spectrum, what we see are people who have the elective mobility. That is, they have the means, the wealth, the skills, and the resources to be able to preemptively move to other parts of their region or even the country to build a new home and a new community in the face of risks from climate change. So essentially they're moving to escape climate change, but the reality is that there's nowhere to escape climate change. And what people are trying to do is think about what places are going to fare better than others in the future.
An increasing number of people seem to think the best places in America are clustered around the Great Lakes. Winters aren't as cold, several big cities, and 20% of the planet's fresh water, all right there. But are the Great Lakes ready for all those people? For that, let's go to my fellow storyteller, Jalyn Henderson, on the shores of Lake Michigan.
Now, Chase, that is the question, and I actually want to take things back just a little bit to get some additional context. In 2018, more than 16 million people were displaced by weather-related disasters, and 1.2 million of them lived right here in the U.S. Now, in situations like these, most people move to the major cities closest to them and rebuild their lives there. Others move to different parts of the country, sometimes for new jobs or because they have family there. But what happens when weather-related disasters become even more common? And then we add in things like food and water shortages because of drought, extreme heat, or sea level rise into the mix. It's likely that a lot of people will pack up and move somewhere new. Somewhere like the Great Lakes region, home of, you guessed it, the Great Lakes.
It's more than 1,000 miles. So this watershed, this huge body of fresh water is absolutely enormous. And so more than 40 million people live very close to it and depend on it. There's nowhere else in the world where this many people live this close to this much easily accessible fresh water. And that's what makes this region unique.
Joel said it best. Water is our claim to fame. And the fact that our region doesn't normally deal with things like hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, drought, or even rising sea levels is also a really big draw. So much so that a handful of cities in the region are being dubbed as climate havens.
You know, I like to call the Great Lakes relatively climate safe. Another way that folks put it is that the Great Lakes has climate amenities. So what are those amenities? Obviously, we have abundant access to fresh water. That's a huge amenity. We also have, relatively mild temperatures. And then the Great Lakes also has a lot of cities that have infrastructure that is actually outsized for the population that lives there. And so now what we have are cities that have, what we like to call really great bones and big bones, right, that can accommodate more people.
The region also has a dependable binational economy, as well as booming agricultural and tourism business. But before you start packing your bags and Zillow searching houses near the Great Lakes, consider this. A climate haven does not mean climate change resistant. This region has seen a lot of change over the years. It just looks a little different than the rest of the country. We're seeing increased temperatures and precipitation causing inconsistent lake levels. There are more invasive species in our waters. The composition of our forest is shifting. And those big bones Rachel was talking about,
You know, we have big bones in our cities, but not all of those bones are really healthy. You know, a lot of our infrastructure is really degraded, you know, and it's not even able to support the people who are relying on it now. You know, that's why we are seeing major floods and transportation disruptions. We have to upgrade and modernize our infrastructure if we're going to use it to support more people.
Climate haven cities like Buffalo, New York, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Duluth, Minnesota have announced pledges and initiatives to make their cities more sustainable, while also preparing for the potential influx of population. But all of these changes take time. So if we had to answer Chase's question today, is the Great Lakes region ready for an influx of climate change migrants?
And right now the answer here, unfortunately, is no.
So how would they get to yes? People like Derek Van Berkel, an assistant professor at the University of Michigan, are trying to figure that out.
And so this shows where is the most social vulnerability.
He also works with the Great Lakes Integrated Science and Assessment Project, or GLISA for short.
The tools that we're trying to build are basically trying to say, what's the perspective of different communities within these cities? So we're using something called participatory GIS, where we ask residents if there was a scenario where there was more population coming to our cities, where would you want development? Where would you want kind of investment in green space and that sort of thing, so that we can bring those voices to the fore.
In addition to getting community input to prep for larger populations, climate experts believe cities will need to tackle land use policies, their relationship with the private sector, fossil fuel consumption, and even social service legislation.
For the longest time, I think many of these cities have been, challenged by the fact that, they're losing population, they're losing tax base. They have to start to think, how could this happen? And then I think also thinking about how to make their cities more livable in a way that's, attractive for migrants.
Climate migration is really an opportunity for our region to envision and think about the future that we want. And we have to make it into that place. And that means that it has to be welcoming to people from all different cultures and backgrounds and races and ethnicities. It means that it has to be a place that really values the natural resources that are contained within it and protects those natural resources.
Looking at how we grow food, how we manufacture products, how we take care of our clean water and make sure that it gets to people safely. We've shown we know how to clean up problems after the fact. Now we just have to show that we know how to fix a problem before it gets worse.